For the next 31 days on the FCPA Compliance Report, we're going to be bringing you a daily tip, strategy, or idea that you can use to improve your program. Here's your host, Tom Fox, the Compliance Evangelist.
Taming complexity in compliance. One of the lessons we've learned from various FCPA enforcement actions over the years is how complexity in business organizations can work to defeat compliance programs. Whether a corrupt employee is working to actively hide a pot of money, which can or will be used to pay a bribe, and improper payment slips through the cracks, complexity can work to defeat a best practices compliance program. If a compliance function does not have visibility into the business unit, how it does business, and how, or rather where its payments are going, it may be due to a design or defect or it's inadvertently complex. Thinking about complexity were several authors of the article Taming Complexity. The first thing to understand about complexity is it's not always a bad thing. Complexity can add to organizational resilience and even flexibility itself. It can also lead to adaptability, such as sustained business and compliance performance, requiring new offerings and capabilities which can be created by recombining existing elements in fresh ways. Finally, complexity can lead to better coordination by business units across geographic regions and product lines. The bottom line to all this is that complexity is not only here to stay, but in an increasingly global world of business, it is a necessity. How is a compliance professional going to deal with this going forward? A compliance function should begin using simple and common operating principles. This increases the chances that the elements and connections will fit comfortably into the organization and also contain complexity. One way to do so is to run your compliance function on foundational principles, specifically including transparency. If you can move towards both transparency in all your processes and protocols and in the human element so that personnel do not hide information, it can work to reduce complexity or at least make the complex less opaque. Perhaps counterintuitively is relaxing controls. While this may sound antithetical to the compliance practitioner, a deeper analysis reveals is actually operationalizing of compliance. Instead of micromanaging each compliance decision, allowing employees the freedom to engage in constant iterative experimentation that can lead to more powerful compliance outcomes deliberately than designing and tightening managing each step. This is particularly true in organizations whose environments are evolving in unpredictable and unprecedented ways. Sound familiar? The operationalization comes from the emergence of innovations. This sounds like the autonomous small teams and even individual employees that are experimenting with new elements and connections, the more options it create for the organization, as long as the innovations are properly codified and made available to all teams and groups. A great example of this is the development of the Regional Compliance Committee. However, the critical element is that employees are required to document and then report their recommendations and predict outcomes. From this point, the compliance function can serve as an enabler and sounding board for the experimenters, incorporating their ideas rather than simply dictating to them. The final step will be familiar to the compliance professional, which is to fix, repair, and prune. While this step is closely akin to prevent, detect, and remediate, it does prevent views not normally used by compliance professionals. It adds a robustness to a mature compliance program. It can work to create a culture that encourages employees to look out for and eliminate obsolete processes. Of course, this requires a true speak-up culture and fully functioning reporting system. If you have this, it will increase both the quality and quantity of innovation. Conversely, if you fail to do so, you might well reach the point where nobody has a complete understanding of your business processes. In other words, things will become too complex. It is true that complexity in an organization can accumulate until it is intractable and hard to reduce through incremental action. If your organization is in that situation, you will need to develop another set of processes to unstick the complexity and recycle resources to reduce overall complexity. One way of achieving this is to establish new structures with a finite time horizon, identifying exit strategies in advance. By building in exit options at the beginning rather than subjecting legacy elements to endless modification, leaders can avoid the accumulation of excessive complexity. While authors believe that most companies say they prefer simplicity over complexity, the truth is that complexity is the increasing necessary for viability and competitiveness in today's environment. I would say this is even more true for the corporate compliance function. As compliance moves into the 2020s and beyond, A great decade of innovation and change is in front of us. Compliance is no longer legal-driven rules and regulations. Compliance is now properly seen and properly recognized as a business process. It is not simply a business innovator, but it can also be a profit center. Compliance is now in an era of brisk innovation and evolution, particularly in the era of coronavirus. It is prone to technological change and rapid obsolescence of the lawyer-driven spreadsheets and word-based document compliance programs. Going forward, the compliance professional needs to understand that a package of resilience, adaptability, coordination, and inimitability are more attractive packages. The key is to learn how to harness complexity on a sustainable basis. So what are today's 3 key takeaways? Number 1, not all complexity is bad. Number 2, figure out how your business units do business before you have a problem, i.e. tame complexity. And 3, compliance is now properly seen as a business process. Take that into account as well. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'd like to thank you again for joining me for this episode of 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program around innovation. And I hope you will join me for our next episode tomorrow. This podcast series on 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.